grief is a human emotional response to loss of any kind. So you may be wondering, how can a painful loss lead to grace? You know, we're so used to thinking about grace and ease. So what about grace and challenge? And what is grace anyway? I found the following metaphysical definition of grace on truthunity.net. Grace is goodwill, favor, disposition to show mercy, and aid from God in the process of regeneration. Good morning. So today I'm talking about discovering grace by moving through grief. And I'm going to start with a reading from Ram Dass. Ram Dass meditates on learning to grieve. And I'm going to read a whole blog post because I couldn't figure out where to cut it off because it seemed all so right to say. So this is from ramdass.org, Learning to Grieve. It is important as we get older to learn how to grieve. Although this may sound self-evident, experience has taught me that it is not. In a culture that emphasizes stoicism and forward movement, in which time is deemed of the essence, and there is little toleration for slowness, inwardness, and melancholy, grieving, a healthy, necessary aspect of life, is too often overlooked. As we get older, of course, and losses mount, the need for conscious grieving becomes more pronounced. Only by learning how to grieve can we hope to leave the past behind and come to the present moment. The older we get, the more we lose. This is the law of impermanence. We lose loved ones, cherished dreams, physical strength, work, and relationships. Often, it seems like loss upon loss. All of these losses bring up enormous grief that must be prepared to embrace completely if we are to live with open hearts. My dear friend Stephen Levine has recommended that we build temples specifically for the purpose of grieving, ritual sites where we can feel safe to pour out the sadness and loss we feel. In the Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva, and in the tradition of the Irish wake, we find such outlets for extended grieving, but these rituals are becoming rare in our culture and are not frequently practiced. Over the years, in working with people who are grieving, I've encouraged them, first of all, to surrender to the experience of their pain. To counteract our natural tendency to turn away from pain, we open to it fully as possible, and allow our hearts to break. We must take enough time to remember our losses, be they friends or loved ones who passed away, the death of long-held hopes or dreams, the loss of homes, careers, or countries, or health we may never get back. Rather than close ourselves to grief, it helps to realize that we only grieve for what we love. In allowing ourselves to grieve, we learn that the process is not cut and dried. It is more like a spiral that brings us into a place of relief, abates for a time, and then continues on a deeper level. Often when grieving, we think that it's over, only to find ourselves swept away by another wave of intense feeling. For this reason, it is important to be patient with the process and not be in a hurry to put our grief behind us. While the crisis stage of grief does pass on its own time, each person's grief has its own timetable. Deep feelings don't disappear completely. But ultimately, you come to the truth of the adage that love is stronger than death. I once met with a girl whose boyfriend was killed in Central America. She was grieving, and it was paralyzing her life. I characterized it for her in this way. Let's say you're in wise woman training. If she's in wise woman training, everything in her life must be grist for the mill. Her relationship with this man would become part of the wisdom in her. But she first had to see that her relationship with him is between souls. They no longer have two incarnated bodies to share, so she has to find the soul connection. Two souls can access each other without an incarnation. When my guru died in 1973, I assumed that because of the important part he played in my life and the love I felt for him, I would be inundated with grief. Surprisingly, I was not. In time, I came to realize why. He and I were so well established in soul love that in the years since he left his body, his palpable presence has continued in my life unabated. And so Ram Dass was a Harvard psychologist and psychedelic researcher who got fired and experienced spiritual transformation when studying with a Hindu guru in India. He later returned to the U.S. and became a spiritual teacher and author who introduced Eastern spiritual concepts to the Western audiences. In his later years, he had a stroke and made a documentary called Fierce Grace, in which he talked about being stroked by grace. It's a very powerful story and details the opportunities for spiritual experiences that he encountered as a result of the changes he had in his functioning. He continued to write and teach on these spiritual gifts as he experienced a process of physical decline, ultimately leading to his death. And I also recommend his book, Still Here, and his documentary, Going Home, which speaks of those experiences. So as you heard in the reading, grief is a human emotional response to loss of any kind. So you may be wondering, how can a painful loss lead to grace? You know, we're so used to thinking about grace and ease. So what about grace and challenge? And what is grace anyway? I found the following metaphysical definition of grace on truthunity.net. Grace is goodwill, favor, disposition to show mercy, and aid from God in the process of regeneration. It is this last aspect I'll be focusing on today, aid from God in the process of regeneration. Notice this does not say aid from God in the process of maintaining the status quo, comfort, pleasant things. Right? So when I listened to regeneration, I'm still on truthunity.net, I found that regeneration is a change in which abundant spiritual life, even eternal life, is incorporated into the body. The transformation that takes place through bringing all the forces of mind and body to support the Christ ideal. The unification of spirit, soul, and body in spiritual oneness. I propose that it is through the divine action of grace that the things that happen to us are transformed into the unfolding of our greater good, the things that are happening for us. As humans, we tend to cling to what is comfortable and familiar. We experience emotional and physical discomfort as the forms in our lives change. As the Buddha observed, life is full of suffering, pain, and misery. And it is our attachments that are the source of our suffering, not the pain. The more we cling to what we think should be, to what we want, the more we suffer, the less we are able to bring all the forces of mind and body to the development of the Christ ideal. So today I will invite you to take another perspective on the pain of loss. The wound is where the light enters you. This is one of my favorite Rumi quotes because of my personal experiences of loss leading to transformation. I have found this to be very true. My realization of how painful experiences had become transformative in my life began when I started to develop a gratitude practice. So when I started coming to Unity and they were like, practice gratitude, I was like, okay, what am I grateful for? And I found that trying to appreciate the abundance of pleasant things in my life felt very fluffy, kind of like cotton candy. It really lacked a feeling of spiritual substance for me. Oh, I like the nice place I live. I like the nice things I have. None of that kind of worked for clicking into my gratitude. And as I explored gratitude further, I became aware that the things I am most grateful for have arisen out of the most extremely challenging things that have happened in my life. And I see them as evidence of grace. I was graced with being able to relate as an equal to people with a wide variety of skill sets after I was taken out of regular school and bused to special education school when they didn't know what to do with me when I started having seizures and wetting my pants in 5th grade. I'm very appreciative of the experience of being able to do that. I'm appreciative of the effectiveness of my counseling and understanding how to work with people who are having severe depression and suicidal thinking, because I had the opportunity to work through that as I took medication that had major depressive side effects and really didn't control the seizures. And I had a lot of chaos going on from the ages of 10 to 45 as I experienced those medications and learned how to use mindfulness and thinking strategies to move forward in my life and not let my thoughts and my feelings and my situation run my life, but for me to step back and be in that space of the Christ I am and not in the chaos of my circumstances. The opportunity to learn even more about dealing with children in special ed that was the focus of my counseling practice happened in 2008 when all the calls stopped and I had to look for another career. And so I went and got certified in special ed, and I'm like, okay, I'm going into the schools. This is going to be great. And then they started firing teachers. So I had the opportunity to substitute because I couldn't get a job. And I got to learn about special ed all over the district, every kind of class from elementary life skills to inclusion to working with kids with autism. And so then that sent me back into my career as a counselor. And I knew so much more about what was going on when kids came in and said, oh God, the teacher, and this is going on, and mom and dad and whatever. So it gave me a lot of understanding. So I'm really grateful for that experience. Most recently, I am grateful for how much loving and oneness I was able to experience with my father before he passed. So the first 6.5 weeks of this year, I spent providing tube feedings for my father in hospice as he lived in my house and being able to go in and love him between sessions. And I'm grateful for the incredible love and support from my partner who welcomed my father into our home and participated in his care and comforted me in my grief. And I'm very grateful for getting to do this talk because my father passed last week and this really has kept me on my path. So sometimes this comes out dry and sometimes it comes out wet. So we're just gonna have to kind of see what happens today because he was my person. He was the person that I always knew loved me unconditionally. And like when Ram Dass was talking about that soul connection, I know he's in my heart. And I'm so glad he didn't have to go to memory care or something like that. But he was able to experience the quality and peacefulness of my home. So I believe an important aspect of grace is the divine action that takes these things that happen to us and uses them for our transformation. Grace moves us through grief and that emotional response to perceived loss to help us release the perspective of being victimized in order to realize the empowerment as the Christ ideal and experience spiritual oneness. So today I propose 5 activities for discovering grace as you move through grief. First one is grieve, replenish, accept, claim your good, engage with life. And looking at these, I've also found unity principles to be very applicable to this process. So I will present a unity principle for each step. So G is for grief. We must feel our feelings and move through them instead of resisting them. We tend to label our feelings as negative or positive, while some feelings are not pleasant or preferred and can be very painful. It is helpful not to judge them, not to call them bad or negative. In order to experience transformation, we have to both release our resistance to the change and our resistance to the pain. And I found it very helpful to stop. sitting right, and it would just come up and then just cry. Say, God is here. God is here in my loving for my Father. God is here in my loving for my church. God is here with me in this pain. And since there's nothing but God here, we also know God is in our feelings, that shock, the disbelief, the numbness, the resistance, the bargaining and wishful thinking, anger, frustration, resentment, tears and fears. All of these come up when change happens. And it's important to recognize that is part of the process, not to judge yourself for feeling this or being mad at somebody who's gone or being still sad when everybody else is no longer crying. And our way shower Jesus Christ expressed his sadness at the state of humanity by weeping, his anger at the loss of sanctity in the temple, turning over tables. He bargained for another outcome and expressed his feelings of hurt and betrayal as the time of his death approached. So yes, we all need to move through our feelings when change occurs. When we try to repress or ignore our emotions in order to avoid processing them, they fester and grow. They obstruct our ability to heal. This is often referred to as spiritual bypass, results from trying to skip the first principle. God is in everywhere and in everything, even the changes that we would not wish for, even in the emotions that are painful to us. God is everywhere present. And when we try to skip that and move directly into trying to control our thoughts and feelings and think the things we want, we skip the step of healing. We need to be present with our feelings in order to feel them without judgment before we can let them go. If we are to truly move beyond our human reaction to loss, we must experience fully. We must recognize there is nothing but God here. In this way, our experiences of pain can become fertilizer for our spiritual growth. Just like manure, it may not be pleasant to deal with. You have to process it. You have to mix some other stuff in. You don't put it straight out in the garden. But it's necessary if we want prolific growth and nourishment. If we are to move through these feelings, we must bring them up, acknowledge them, love them, and release them. We can express them verbally by speaking or writing to share them with God, who is everywhere present, our peers, our pets, plants, or professionals. There are lots of options for who to talk to or write to about these things. If writing's not your thing, we can also express them creatively with art or music. Coloring has been shown to reduce stress and reduce our stress chemicals. And taking a red crayon and working out your anger can be a very freeing thing. Physical activity can also be cathartic, like putting your anger into tearing cloth, as is a Jewish tradition, wailing, walking a labyrinth, kneading dough, chopping wood, mashing clay. These can all be ways of pulling your emotions up and moving through them. We can also simply focus on our breath. And as we breathe in, we observe our emotions. And as we breathe out, we release them. In a meditative state, inhaling and exhaling, we can observe and release, pulling up these things that are painful, seeing them as God, and letting them on their way. R is for replenish. After we're able to feel our feelings without judgment, we must also take time out of focusing on our pain to replenish ourselves. Grief can be exhausting. So the second principle of unity can be helpful at this point. Human beings are divine at their core and therefore inherently good. We need to nurture our body, mind, and spirit as an act of devotion to the Christ that we are. We need to allow ourselves to receive help from others if our energy is depleted and we have challenges with the motivation or energy to meet our basic needs for nutrition or self-care or home care. And I was blessed to be able to share my laundry with somebody when I couldn't get it done because of all the stuff going on with the hospice and my dad. Somebody bring me food a few times. It was very beautiful, that connection, that nourishing of getting support from others. We also need to take extra time for spiritual practices. These times are time for extra meditation, not less. Moving through those things and letting ourselves rest. May need to burn off active chemicals, the stress chemicals with activity. We may need emotional pampering with activities such as hot bath, or massage, cuddling a pet, favorite food, music or shows, as ways of getting replenished. There can also be a bittersweet kind of both feeling the feelings and feeling replenished to engage in those activities that you enjoyed with a loved one. Going out for a favorite food. And when my dad used to take me out for French toast, and when it went out the second day after he passed with my sister and had the traditional meal at the traditional restaurant, and it was both nurturing and a release. I'd never cried through French toast before, but God was there. God was there. I found after my grandmother passed that there was always some woman in church who sounded like her. And so I got extra devoted to going to church to be with my grandmother. And then one day I found out that was my voice. And I always have her with me when I sing. When my grandfather passed, I had these extra energy for meditating at the piano. He and I, most of our relationship was at a piano. He started teaching me to play when I was 3. He managed a music store. He actually gave me a piano when I was in elementary school. And I would just get these musical inspirations and just play. And so I find my grandfather in my meditation, in the music that comes through me as the divine within me. And my father had a mantra that he learned from sitting at a magnolia tree. It was, all is one is all, all. And I found that started coming into my heart as he was declining. And that is part of my signal connection with him. And so I've been finding my grandmother's voice, my grandfather's music, and my father's words in all is one and one is all is one and one is all. So I've been soothing myself with that. So as we care for the divine temple as an act of devotion to our sacred self, we can remember we are whole and complete. Divinity is our true nature. A is for accept. When we accept the change that we perceive as loss, we can begin to explore ways in which the change can lead to the unfolding of our good. At this point, we can start to move from that perception that something has happened to us that leads us to feeling like a victim and start finding what is expanding for us. The third principle now helps us transforming our understanding of the change that we are encountering. Thoughts have creative power to determine events and attract experiences. The idea here is to let go of the judgments about the loss. It is what it is. We find ourselves focused on the tragedy of the situation, how it should not have happened, the wrong that was done, the shame of it all. We prevent ourselves from moving forward into the next step and continue to loop back on those painful emotions, reclaiming them and clinging to them after we have brought them up and released them. So this requires being mindful of our thinking and refocusing ourselves when we find that we are replaying those judgments about the situation. We need to just let it be what it is. C is for claim your good. By claiming our good, we move into the perception that something is happening for us and the awareness that it can be good. The fourth principle can assist us here. Prayer and meditation keep us aligned with the one great power in the universe. Meditation assists us with letting go of that tendency to cling and helps us connect with our divine nature. It actually rewires our brain so that we can focus on the good unfolding and stay out of that fight, flight, freeze response and be in the present moment. Denials and affirmations can also be helpful with this process of recognizing the difference between our human perception of circumstance and our spiritual truth. Denials give recognition to the human experience we are having, and affirmations move us into that realization of truth. Even though I am having painful feelings, I know the truth is that my good is unfolding in divine order with divine timing and divine wisdom, and I appreciate the Christ I am. I also have found the following prayer adapted from the work of Mary Mrzowski extremely helpful when dealing with circumstances that are painful. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me in this moment because I know it's here for my learning. I welcome all thoughts, feelings, conditions, persons, and situations. I let go of my desire for esteem and approval. I let go of my desire for comfort and convenience. I let go of my desire for security and survival. I let go of my need to change any situation, condition, person, or myself. I open to the sacred presence of the divine and gratefully accept the healing action within. And so this was very important to me when, at a time when I was meditating and my seizures were starting to decrease. I started using this to let go of my needs for survival when I started crossing the street because I was always scared I wasn't going to make it. And so this let me not be scared. I said, okay, if I make it across the street, if I move to go across the street and I make it, God has something for me. And if I don't make it, maybe I have some kind of disability awareness about streets for people. So, God can be in it, whatever happens. And so this welcoming whatever is helps move us into claiming our good. E is for engage. When we engage fully in life, we empower ourselves to grow around our grief, to transform our loss into a blessing. Instead of waiting for the silver lining to rain out of the cloud, we must go out and mine it. The fifth principle applies here. It is not enough to understand our teachings, spiritual teachings. We must live the truth we know. The opening provided by loss invites us to do new things, to learn, and to grow. As we transform, we may recognize new opportunities to better enjoy life, to have a richer and expanded sense of purpose and meaning. We may find new ways of giving back to our families, friends, and our communities. We may develop new skills to share, new talents to cultivate, new interests to explore. Being active as a co-creator, we do that work of exploring, discerning, and implementing. We allow others to behold the Christ we are. So, and I'm very grateful I'm about to sing you a song. It's my first time singing in person and by myself, so that's going to be a stretch for me. This is my first time up here, so kind of all this chaos and loss. I'm still grieving about Cherie, but I'm glad to be here with you today. So all of this engaging has definitely helped me to move through this past week as I've adjusted to the loss of my father. So in summary, we discover grace by moving through grief. There we go. So grace. G is for grieve. When outer forms change, we will need to allow ourselves to feel and process our emotions to move through the human experience of loss. We recognize principle 1. God is all there is and present everywhere, even in our painful emotions. R is for replenish. When we take restorative actions, we honor our divine nature with caring devotion. Human beings are divine at their core and inherently good. A is for accept. The practice of acceptance allows us to release our judgments as a preparation to utilize our creative powers to manifest our greater good in our lives and in the lives of others. We claim C is for claim. Using the power of our words in prayer, we claim the transformation we desire, further releasing our clinging to forms that have passed from existence and welcoming what is present. E is for engage. When we wholeheartedly engage in life, we are able to fully manifest the blessings that appear by opening ourselves to new growth and releasing our mental clinging to what no longer serves us or has passed out of existence. In this way, we invest in the infinite unfolding of new beginnings. We recognize Principle 5. It is not enough to understand spiritual teachings. We must live the truth we know. By allowing ourselves to grieve, honoring our divine nature, by focusing on restorative activities, accepting what is, claiming our good in prayer and meditation, and engaging our creative powers to manifest new growth, we experience grace and allow the light to flow through our wounds. And so this next song is a song that came up for me a couple of years ago. I need the meditation back. I wrote this, the words and the music.
Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.